So here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to take those 34 years of experience I've had learning valuation and compress it into a few lessons that hopefully will help you when you sit down to value companies. Incidentally, along the way, the country I've been to most frequently in the last 34 years is Brazil. In 2019, when I came to Brazil, it was my 22nd visit to Brazil. You know, the first time I came to Brazil was in 1998. Most of you are too young to remember what Brazil looked like in 1998. So if you complain about how terrible things are now, you should see what the world looked like in 1998. People were still shell-shocked from the hyperinflation of the early 90s. So here's what I'd like to do. I'm going to spend some time talking not about the mechanics of valuation, but the philosophical foundations of valuation. You're saying, what are you talking about? Valuation is all about numbers. Not really. I'm going to lay out some very broad themes about valuation, and I'm going to start with a question that I get asked all the time. Is valuation a science or an art? Anybody feel comfortable being a guinea pig? Because I'm going to ask you this question. So, Diego, are you comfortable enough answering? Unmute yourself if you can. Oh, there you are. You're in. Okay, you ready?
I'm sorry. Could you repeat the question?
Is valuation so the question I'm going to ask you is valuation a science?
I would say it's more of a psychological.
So all you have to say is it's not a science. Let's not even characterize it yet. It's not a science. Is that
right.
Fair? Right?
Okay.
Let's make things simpler. Is mathematics a science?
Sounds about right.
It is the only pure science. Mathematicians are convinced that they're the only science. Now let's think about what it is about mathematics that makes it a science. 2 plus 3 is 5. Whether I count my left hand, my right hand, the North Pole, the South Pole, in Brazil, the US, with a calculator, with a computer, 2 plus 3 is always 5. It's not maybe 5, it could be 5. It is 5, and if you get any other answer, you're wrong. The essence of a science is if you get the inputs right, you get the output right. And if you got the output wrong, you must have done something wrong. Mathematics is definitely a science. Physics is mostly a science. The laws of gravity are the laws of gravity. But if the definition of a science, you get the inputs right, you get the output right, valuation can never be a science. You can see why, right? If I said in last November, you're familiar with Airbnb, the company that, it went public in November. I valued Airbnb on my blog. You can go read the valuation. So I sat down to value Airbnb with their prospectus. You know what a prospectus is? When a company goes public in the US, it files financials. So you know what the company did, what its history looks like. So I took its prospectus. I brought everything I knew about valuation into the picture. I did my best to estimate a value for Airbnb. But even though I did my best, is my valuation going to be right? There is zero chance of it being right. In fact, it's going to be definitely wrong. You know why? Because I'm not God. Some of you might be God, but what are you trying to do in valuation? You're trying to forecast the future. We're all going to be wrong. Valuation can never be a science. So it must be an art, right? So let's see what a true art looks like. Painting. Not painting your house, but painting hang in the museum. It's an art, right? I still remember taking my oldest son when he was 8 years old to the Met for a Picasso exhibit. So we go to so he's 8 years old, I take him, we come out 30 minutes later and I said, Ryan, what did you think about that exhibit? He said, Dad, I was not impressed. I said, what do you mean you're not impressed? That was a Picasso exhibit. He said, this guy can't get the nose in the right place. I mean, notice with Picasso's, the nose comes out of the side of the head, the top of the head. It's almost like he was either drugged or drunk, which given Picasso's history is probably both. If my son had praised Picasso's, you know what they'd be worth? Nothing. Thank God for Picasso, he's not the appraiser. But for whatever reason, we've gathered together and said, Picasso, he's special. The essence of an art is you really cannot teach it. Great artists are just born. Thank God valuation is not an art, because if it were, I wasted 35 years of my life trying to teach something that cannot be taught. So it's not a science and it's not an art. What the heck is it? I'll give you the word that I use to describe valuation. It's a craft. I'll tell you what's closest to valuation. It's cooking. How do you master cooking? How do you learn cooking? You could read cookbooks, right? You could watch cooking shows. But trust me, if all you do is read and watch, you will never be able to cook.